The Mousehole Cat, a story for Isaac. Once upon a time, there was a cat called Mouser. She had an old cottage with a window that overlooked the sea, and she liked to sit outside on a coil of rope with her old fisherman named Tom. Tom was very kind to Mouser. He always gave her lots of milk and liked to stroke her in just the exact spot behind her left ear where she liked to be tickled. Tom was a fisherman, and during the day he used to go out in his boat onto the sea looking for fish. Mouser liked fish, and old Tom brought home the fish and cooked it and gave it to Mouser for her tea. Then one winter, when all the boats were lying safely in the harbour, the great storm cat started stirring. The waves in the sea were terrible and high, but the storm cat could not get into the safe harbour of Mousehole, even though it tried. But unfortunately, that meant that the fishing boats could not go out, and so there was no fish. The people started to get very hungry, and so one day old Tom said to Mouser, "I'm really sorry, Mouser, I can't stand by. I'm going to have to take my boat out even though the storms are terrible." The next morning Tom set off for the sea, and Mouser decided to go with him. After all, he was only a man, and men didn't know how to deal with the great storm cat. But also she thought, if Tom doesn't come back, I don't much want to live in that cottage without him. As the ship sailed towards the gap in the harbour, Mouser could hear the great storm cat yowling and howling outside of the walls. And she thought how sad he must be, having no warm home to return to, and her heart was moved to comfort him. She lifted her head and sang, joining her call with the cry of the great storm cat. The great storm cat was so surprised by her singing that he paused long enough to allow them out of the harbour. But then, like all cats, he began to play with them as they journeyed over the sea, and the waves became strong and tossed the boat, and then he would leave them be for a while, and then he would play with them again, tossing them and playing with them, watching them struggling on the high waves. "Mouser," Tom said, "I can hardly get my nets out. I think you'll have to sing again. See if you can get the storm cat to stop just for a moment." Mouser sang and sang, and all day long the great storm cat played with the boat, but never quite sinking it. And in the evening they pulled up the nets, and they were full of fish. And when Mouser began to think of all the lovely fish she would have when she got home and the warm fireside, she began to purr, and her purring rose like a great hymn to the sky, and the great storm cat was calmed. When they returned to Mousehole, they found an amazing sight waiting for them. Everyone was out waiting for them, because when they had seen the light in old Tom's cottage, they knew he'd taken his boat out to find fish for them. As Tom and Mouser's boat reached the harbour at Mousehole, a sudden breeze caught them, like a tiny, playful cat's paw, pushing them as a last gesture of farewell. That night there was a great celebration in Mousehole, and lots of cooking, making stargazy pie and pilchards and the cats were all very happy that there was now fish.